I'm Knox, and welcome to another episode of the Cult of You. I want to start off with a couple of just quick announcements. So firstly, as I've mentioned in my last video on the Shema Mephoras, there's a couple of changes that is going to be coming forward with the show as well as with my own work. Now, as a result of me kind of implementing those changes, the next few months, basically from now until December, there will be a bit of a slowdown on the content that I put out on this channel. I'm not stopping by any means. There's still going to be content. There's still going to be some episodes, some interviews. There's still going to be like Bull's still going to be doing the astrology pieces. We're still going to be bringing out content. We're just slowing it down a little bit, and the main reason for that is because I'm starting work on new content, just different styles, just in different directions I want to take the show in, things that I think will be more interesting to you, and it'll be a lot more fun for me to create as well. Alongside that, the team's grown. There's going to be some new segments and new pieces coming out. All of them are scheduled for December, alongside the launch of our app, which I mentioned. But with that, I do want to kind of highlight one thing. If you are somebody that's interested in my course of the Cult of You, that course is basically going to be closed as of the end of this month. I'm not completely terminating it, but there are components of it that I'm moving into my demontership program. Members, if you are a member of that course, don't worry, your lifetime access, as I promised, does stay. But I'm going to basically stop selling that course at the end of this month. So essentially from August 2022, that course will no longer be available for sign up. So if you're still keen to get in, now is your kind of last chance to kind of sign up for that program. A large portion of that course will be re-released inside of the Which I Am app as a learning path with some components around that. But some of the other components in there, I quite frankly just think they're a little advanced, and they can be very easily misrepresented or can be harmful if somebody didn't follow that work progressively. So that's going to change. That's going to be released in a different format. And again, the app is going to come out at the end of the year. The new shows and everything's going to come out. And again, we're not going anywhere. We're just going to go through a little bit of a rebranding exercise, kind of organizing the segments. The Cult of You name we own is going to stay the same. There is going to be more of a blog that really dives more deeply into these subjects and the authors and the other thinkers inside of the community. We're bringing out the store. There's going to be the app, Which I Am, and the Which I Am app is basically going to be where all our training programs and the training programs of other teachers are going to be. One of the things that is really important for me as we kind of go into this, I wanted to make sure that I leave you with something useful. And I always kind of start my segments off and remind you to live deliciously.
What canst thou give?
Wouldst thou like the taste of butter, a pretty dress? Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
Yes.
It's always been this thing associated to the devil and associated to the heathen lifestyle of pleasure and ecstasy. And it's really something that I think is one of the more misunderstood concepts. And in our world today, it's one of the things that most people seem to be very deeply disconnected from. They don't know how to live deliciously. And when they do, they turn it into something that's corrupt. In fact, a very interesting correlation is how we see the transition from Dionysus into Bacchus by the influence of the Romans from that Greek initial kind of idea. Dionysus was the reverie of the altered states. It was the pleasure of the abandonment. It wasn't the drunkenness. It wasn't the abuse of these things. In fact, those were kind of no-nos in many ways. It was only when the idea of Bacchus kind of came in, where it was the lord of drunkenness and essentially the pleasure gone corrupt. It kind of reminds me of, there's a phrase that I really kind of disdain, and it's something when little kids sometimes get too much of what they want. You know, parents will often say, oh, you're so spoiled. And we kind of say that as an enduring term, but it's really a bad thing where we get to link this idea of having pleasure or having abundance or having, like, we're spoiled, like we're suddenly like going to be rotten fruit, you know, so that every time that there's some joy or pleasure, there's going to be an extreme price to pay. And it's the same kind of attitude that prevents us from really opening ourselves up to joy, because we have this default attitude: the more you open yourself up to joy, the more likely the pain is going to come. So today I want to dive into that. I want to explore how to live deliciously. What's the keys to ecstasy? How do we find more joy joy and more juice out of life? And how do we stop limiting the joy and the pleasure that we have? So without any further ado, sit back, relax, and let me show you how to live deliciously. I think it's with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek that I chose my coffee cup today, right? And the reason I did that is because I remember this one time on Facebook camp. I was watching a reel, and it was from this new age Christian, whatever. It was from this, you know, little Orthodox kid that's trying to like sound like he's in the know, and he was talking about how love is the law, and do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And he used this as a premise for an argument that said that, you know, all these people in the occult, they have no morality, they don't have any integrity, they're all about, you know, just like doing what you want and not having reverence for the other, and that's why that's always surrounded with the devil and everything. And I astrally slapped this guy because it just reminded me of the level of ignorance, and also again the danger of sometimes letting information out for non-initiates. I mean, it's not that, you know, the person is, you know, a complete and total idiot. It's just our fault in many ways as occultists and practitioners out there. You know, we put out information sometimes without the context that's necessary to it. It's really why there was that big little notice at the start of this video that goes, hey, there's a lot more to this. Do your research. One little video can't give you all the answers. But at the end of the day, this is why initiation existed, right? Initiation existed to basically say, look, you first need to know this, get that down, and then you move on to this level, right? Same thing in our educational systems, right? You can't expect a grade 1 to suddenly understand like university level mathematics, right? It's just, it's ridiculous, you know, or for a little baby to kind of understand the deep complexities of biology and its effects on human behavior. You wouldn't care to, right? And this is really what the problem is, where especially in today's world with TikTok and all these other things, we're throwing out ideas and they're being misrepresented. It's like the statement by Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss. Absolutely great advice, you know, for an entrepreneur or for somebody actively doing therapy. Horrible advice for a pervert or a drug addict or somebody that's a serial killer or a narcissist. They're context dependent, and there's a lot of these things that need to be taken into consideration. So oftentimes when we take up the statement, live deliciously, you know, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And obviously that's a more complex idea. There is a lot of these pre-established ideas and stages of development that is necessary for one to grasp these higher liberated levels of life. This is a very important thing. It's one that I see in the left-hand path very, very actively, and it's the kind of gateways of Dante's Inferno. And the reason I use that reference is because if we look at the kind of model of hell in Dante's Inferno, we see almost like these oceans of depression and sorrow, madness, almost like as precursors to the journey that lies ahead. And this is a very interesting thing that I find very clearly in the path. There's so many that try and talk about the magic and the mystery of the, the powers of the dark side and all these things like that. But then they're miserable human beings. They're deeply impoverished, not just financially, but I mean emotionally. They're always at the effect of the world and what other people are doing. They're always in reaction. This is firstly not a very spiritually developed, kind of state. This is somebody that runs out to, demons and things out there as a way to escape the drama within inside themselves. This is not at all the left-hand path or the path of the occult or the spiritual paths in the first place. That is just an unhealthy human being that's emotionally and psychologically immature and looking for quick fix solutions. They're definitely not anything what this path is about. This path is fundamentally one of self, the transmutation, the alchemy of self, to liberate from the soul, from the self, these divine gifts, these shiddish. And these shiddish are not necessarily just powers, they're states of being, they're qualities of joy, because the Magus understands that I don't want money for money, right? I don't want a car because I want a car. I want a car because it gives me freedom to move. So I want freedom of expression, or I want status. There's emotional and psychological states that are behind these things, right? These are the big things. I don't want love because I want more people around me in that sense. I want the people around me because I want a sense of connection. I want a sense of love. I don't necessarily just want physical bodies. I want that intimacy. I want that connection. These are the things that I'm really after. But as we begin this journey of personal development, and that's really what occultism is. Occultism is self-help on steroids. It's personal development and growth on steroids. That's what it really is at its root. It's getting to the next level. It's not repressing or ignoring anything, but it's actually dealing and resolving all these fundamental parts. So one of the things that we start to do in this progression line of things is we start, sometimes after a number of relationships, realize that, wait, the source of the love is not the other person. The source of the love is actually me. How does that work? Well, this person doing this thing represents a certain state to me, much the same way as your sigils do in magic. They represent a certain state. And through accessing that emotional state, we eventually start to anchor, to link the two together. Then that state or that symbol becomes that thing, right? And when we then just see that thing, you see that person's face, you instantly melt. That's great. But now what happens when that person leaves or that situation changes? Suddenly, now we don't have access to that state anymore and we're in pain. We've literally created a divide within ourselves and the source of the state, projecting that source of the state outside of ourselves to people, places, times, things, and events, as Joe Dispenza so well points out. And as such, we are lost. It's this eternal symbolism of the alchemist blindfolded in search of nature and nature walking right beside him. We're looking in the wrong direction for something that dwells within ourselves. So when we are magi, this is the thing we start to understand, that the journey is within. The thing that we're looking for us is within ourselves. It's not in the world. It doesn't matter how much money you're going to have. It doesn't matter how much success and lovers and all these other material things. We even see the symbolism in the Bhagavad Gita of, man being ridden wild by the senses being the horses that are chasing the chariot being the mind. And it's extra slavery inside of the world of TikTok and Instagram today and other social media platforms, where we're seeing these rich sensory worlds, which again, we've been conditioned to. That's pleasure. That's ecstasy. That's joy. That's the other thing. And we're chasing those things. We constantly feel ourselves in a sense of need and desperation and emptiness and sorrow for the things that we are quote unquote lacking. And the reason we're lacking them is because of cognitive dissonance. And the ideas of cognitive dissonance can be very easy to understand. We look at, for example, a game show like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And an interesting thing happens inside of this experience. We have a man that's, pretty well educated on general knowledge or whatever the field is, right? Sitting there being answered question by somebody reading cue cards, right? Essentially. And when we interview these people, we will find that the audience tends to think that the person reading the cue cards is the most intelligent. And, you know, if you're thinking rationally about that, I mean, that guy's just sitting there reading cue cards, right? He doesn't know any of the knowledge this person struggling to answer it knows. The extra funny thing is if we ask the person being interviewed, being asked the questions, who's most intelligent, he also thinks the person asking them the questions is. This is disproportionate. It's cognitive dissonance, right? Now, the problem with cognitive dissonance is it makes us go into the state of depression or lack of worth, self-worth. And the moment we do that, we make the world outside of us seem better and greater than it actually is. It's a psychological projection. Instead of recognizing the beauty and the power and the knowledge within us, we suddenly project it outside of ourselves because of the state that we are in. Now look at the media, look at the world, look at society out there. I mean, think about it. You go out and you go watch a movie today, right? Firstly, most movies have some kind of love story for it. One of our most basic human needs. We need love, we need a bond, we want family, we want to grow. You may not consciously agree with that statement, but I invite you to kind of look at the hurt behind that thing that kind of makes you say that statement. But when we dive into these basic survival fundamental needs of ourselves, now we go out to Hollywood movies and you see Superman, right? You see a guy that is literally from another planet with supernatural powers and unnatural beauty, who's always perfect, who can't get the girl, right? He just, the super being can't get the girl, you know. And then if that being can't get the girl, how can we? Right? You get what I'm saying? There's this unconscious message being delivered in our society that creates a disproportionate perspective of self, and that puts us in constant cognitive dissonance. It puts us in this place where we're constantly emotionally disconnected from our resourcefulness. You don't see common people in films or in magazines or anything like that. In fact, you know, and I emphasize again Joe Dispenza's work, but one of the things that he does brilliantly is on his YouTube channel and his other works, he shows common day-to-day people curing themselves from cancer, doing these things. And the reason he does that specifically is because only when you look at people that are doing the impossible and you link yourself, you, oh, but that's like me, they've got the wart or the little belly or something like that, they're like me, then your brain goes, this is self-referable, this is possible for me. If they can do it, I can do it. And that's when a large shift dynamically begins to happen with ourselves. Now, one of the things about this cognitive dissonance space is it creates a lot of drug addict-like behavior. It creates a lot of desperate behavior. And let me give you an example from Robert Johnson's book, Ecstasy. And in Ecstasy, he describes a wonderful little story about a British doctor that then studies some of the Hindu diets in certain parts of India. And he comes to the conclusion that there's no way that these people should actually be nourished. They should be a rat, like a cat living in those circumstances would be malnourished. So he goes over to India and he studies some of these people and he finds they're not malnourished, they're fine. Then he takes them out of that environment and he takes them to London and he puts them on the same diet, and you know what? 3 weeks in, they're malnourished. And he starts to investigate this and he finds out the problem is that the food in London is too clean. The environment they grow up, there's sometimes still like, you know, all kinds of what we would consider impurities inside of the food. But as it turns out, these very impurities is what is needed to create the probiotics and create all the other things that makes it still sustainable and still healthy for it. It's our attempt to kind of super purify, super perfect that actually causes a lot, because we're judging. This is good, that is bad, this is right, that is wrong. We're constantly in this upheaval of dramas, of dissonance. And the problem with this dissonance is we created the biggest one with ourselves when we started creating shame and attaching shame to us. You know, all those little desires and kinks and interests that you have where you're like, bad boy or bad girl, not good enough, not socially acceptable, not the superhero that's going to struggle to get the girl, you know, not this idealized imago, not this idolized fantasy self. And every time it's not that divine sacred self, it's somehow impure, not good enough, bad, wrong. And as such, we repress it more and more into the subconscious. These shadow parts, or shadow self, as we say, kind of then starts creating lives of their own. Entire personalities exist inside of each and every one of us. There's an entire kingdom of quote-unquote heaven and hell existing inside of everyone's personal unconscious, and within that there are deeper tiers and layers. You have all the good intentions. You wake up and you're like, I'm gonna start my day with power, and you do the first day, and then the second 2 weeks after that you can't get out of bed, right? What's the part of you that's sabotaging you, adding to this drama, adding to this kind of concern? Now, that part is the repressed components of yourself. That is the part of yourself that you're disconnected from, that you're disassociated from, that you have created shame to. And we think that's what we're supposed to do. Oh, that's just bad, that's wrong. Yet if we look at magic, what it's taught us, take the work of Austin Spare, right? And part of Austin Spare is, after doing this complete work of the sigil creation, is then to repress and force it into the unconscious. And through that, it takes on a life of its own. Okay, so what happens when you repress and force down your guilt, your shame, your judgment, your I'm a imposter syndrome, your I'm a weirdo, I'm different, I'm unaccepted, I'm a failure? These things take on lives of themselves. And that's why if we look at work like existential kink and other forms of therapy and processes like that, the first part is to discover what's pleasurable, rediscover the light. What do we say in the dark side? The Klipov contains within themselves the Nitsutsut, the light within the darkness. What's the pleasure? What's the ecstasy behind your demonic self, your darker aspects? Once we do that, we can start integrating this, and this is very crucial. There's this idea that I found very well kind of expressed in the book Gaian Alchemy and in many others. But one of the things that Stephen talks about in Gaian Alchemy is that part of our disconnect is this disconnect from our imaginative psyche and this complete materialistic component. And we see that. We become completely rational, and the rational mind is incredibly important. It's what allows us some of the most abstract ideas that we've come to develop today. Machine learning, the latest advances in neuroscience and biology, computer programming and other technologies, these are all the result of extreme rational thinking. Most of our medicine today is the result of extreme rational thinking. But as anybody that explores the structure of somatic descent and the exploration of this, we find a very interesting idea. And this is an idea that was highlighted in a book, and please forgive me, I don't recall the author, but it was called My Stroke of Genius. A woman who had a stroke to the left side of her brain and suddenly had the full expanse of the right side of her brain open up. And the thing that happened is this fear, this isolation, this loneliness, all this stuff, it went away, it disappeared. She felt an incredible connection, she was a connected nerve to everything and everyone around her. And sure, it was overwhelming at first, but that's again literally our nature, right? That's, as I spoke about it with Dr. Bynum inside of that episode around the unconscious is this massive ocean, and our ego exists to help us kind of manage that thing. So if we're now suddenly opening all the floodgates, that's why a lot of people go mad or crazy when they're suddenly starting to explore occultism. They're not ready for that onslaught of the unconscious. It's too big and too vast, especially for someone who's not initiated, who is not trained. And what I'm saying here, though, is very important still. That your rational, logical mind is fundamentally important. It must be cultivated and must be developed because it's given us the advances of science and of technology and all these other parts, but it does not give happiness. It disconnects us from our fundamental ecstasy. It looks at the moons and the stars and goes, these are just, giant balls of gas and whatever. It looks at the body and we're just cells. The magic is taken out, and magic is meaning. And this is very important. When Viktor Frankl, one of the survivors of the Holocaust, was going through that terrible experience inside of the concentration camps and was basically saying, what was the difference? Because there were people that came in, they were all in the same circumstances, yet some people immediately basically shriveled up and died, and others seemed to get stronger and healthier, more vibrant. And when he interviewed these people to find the difference, he found the difference was not the circumstances, the environment, or any of these facts. The difference was the meaning these people associated. Essentially, when there was a more empowering meaning to this horrible experience, those people thrived. When the meaning was, this is terrible, this is failure, this is empty, these people died. The body responded, the psyche responds against to the message. It's Shakti that calls on for Shiva. That's the Kundalini that longs for, the desires, the infinite, emptiness of consciousness for its impression, wants to fold and mold around it. Our emotional body is constantly looking to the mind to say, what are we experiencing? What is reality? What is this journey? What am I going to create? What am I going to flow into? What am I going to form into? And if the message is unclear and unhealthy, we struggle. And now we live in a world oftentimes where you start judging yourself. I can't do that because of my sexual preference. I can't have that because of my color of my skin or my religion or my this or my economy or my this, that, or the other. It's funny how we will blame things on the economy or blame things on our gender when some of the greatest revolutions have been exactly in spite of that. We talk about, the economy going down, but if we look at the history of our species, it was in recessions where some companies and some peoples became billionaires. It was during COVID's pandemic when everyone's like, oh, we're messed, where some of the first, many new billionaires became part of the thing. In fact, even if you look at the census reports, there's more people now than there were before that. So our entire perspectives are self-referred based upon our internal beliefs. Our internal beliefs essentially determines our experience of reality, and that determines the reality we are able to create. Now, this is very important for the following reason. You sit upon this mountain known as the unconscious, and we are only seeing the tip of its iceberg. It contains within itself everything, all these different archetypes, beings, components of the self. So the way to find the ecstasy is to go inside there. It's to change your relationship with that and unlock these forces within yourself by starting to understand them. It's quite literally through the ladder of the imagination that we explore the tree of life. And noticing and dealing and conversing actively, as Jung would say, active imagination. It's by then ritualizing these internal components of ourselves that we begin to actually get in touch with the portions of our psyche responsible for our joy, for our ecstasy, for the true delicious texture of life that then makes everything beautiful again. And if life is not beautiful, it's because you're disconnected from those things out there. And that's why I give the example that I did earlier in the story of ecstasy. You see, we have come to a place emotionally where we are malnourished. We think to ourselves that when I have that car, this cleaned up version of status, when I have that kind of fake relationships, I've been there. I've dated all the supermodels and I've, had all the crazy, billion-dollar clients and things like that. And sometimes that's been the most horrific, empty places that I've been emotionally, because I was settling for super clean and super purified instead of sometimes enjoying the raw, decadent nature of my own life and finding the beauty and the ecstasy in that. And when I discovered that, I discovered the rich nourishment. So if you're not experiencing ecstasy in your day-to-day life, you are psychically malnourished. And if you are psychically malnourished, you're more likely to be overeating, you're more likely to suffer from various forms of addiction, you're more likely to settle in relationships and in life in general. You're probably going to have fights about stupid, pointless quotes on the internet and all these things. If you look at the drama that's out there, that's why it's out there. It's out there because these people are emotionally and psychologically malnourished. They've disconnected from their deliciousness. They've disconnected from their ecstasy. The things that make them feel alive are so deeply repressed in the unconscious because they're so shamed. And then what do? They judge other people for the same thing. They look for fights that are meaningless because they have lost sense with purpose. If we look at the initial kind of symbolism of the pentagram, that's what it boils down to. You have the four elements that represents the four fundamental aspects of human psychology, which is the building blocks of the ego. And then you have spirit that governs over all of them. Spirit is purpose. It's what is the purpose that unites your psychological air, water, and fire. It is what is the uniting purpose between these different archetypes and psychic components within yourself, to stop them being in rebellion, having unconscious things that work against you on a day-to-day level. What's the harmony with yourself? The purpose of religion is relegare in its Latin root, right? To reconnect. It's to reconnect these various components of yourself. And without a ritual practice, a spiritual practice, you don't have that. But here's the problem that everyone has when they get into these magical ideas. They're interesting, but they do the same thing I saw in the seduction communities. You know, people get so caught up on the script. Oh, that next. And they're so externally referenced, and they don't know all the steps because they're not the ones that invented them. There's always the next course, the next product, the next grimoire, the next book, the next discovery past this. And it becomes a constant externalization of your power. Take the grimoires, put them aside. Go sit and work with your dreams. Go sit in your ritual space and symbolize in your ritual space. Not what you picked up in a grimoire that says you need 5 candles and 7 bunnies and whatever other rubbish that's there. Go into your psyche, close your eyes, start to imagine, create a secret garden or a sacred space. You know, create a representative of your higher self, of your holy guardian angel, of your daemon. And then speak to it. Actively, out loud if you need to, or internally, and then let the imaginatory journeys play, and then log everything. By logging everything, by reporting to somebody, have somebody that you can work with, a professional even, you know, a Jungian analyst if you can find one, you know, or somebody else who's also committed to personal development that can hold you accountable, that you share these things with, and you help reflect to ask yourself, what does it mean? Because you don't go, and this is another problem that we see in the occult, you see everyone going into those places and they go like, oh, the great demon Excavar came to me and I am now his prophet. No, you are just deluded because you can't deal with the, you know, intensity of the forces of the unconscious. Instead, go and simply say, what is this symbolic of? Now, the problem is that these forces can possess us. They can become that intense, especially if we haven't really dealt with them, especially if we can't find a middle ground. And that's the problem that a lot of people have when they start this work. They try to go to the deepest level of the occult, like the Shema Mephiras and the Goetia and everything, and they've never even developed the circle. What is the circle in magic? That's not the stones that you throw around in a group. That's not like, you know, oh, by the powers of 3 but times 3. It's none of that rubbish. It's a sense of a mature, healthy boundary. That's the circle. That's why we create a circle. It represents this personal boundary of a healthy, well-adjusted ego, because that's what your ego is supposed to do. It's supposed to liaise between the forces of your unconscious. It's supposed to negotiate, come to terms with these different intense forces. You know, but what you have is you have a bunch of people that get completely irrational. They completely jump the gun. They go all the way to the other side, and then they're no longer part of society. You know, they're all those extremes, and that's not healthy. That's now going to the exact opposite, you know, of the rational. And that may give you wonderful moments and insights and experience the same way that the extreme rational does. But none of them is a whole being. They're only half sides of the coin, and you need to be whole. That's the point of this entire journey. That's where the ecstasy lies. That's where the joy and the richness and the beauty of these things lie. Because why is this important in this whole living deliciously? You see, because once you start actively building this relationship within yourself, you stop going, you know, when that person responds to my text, I'll be happy. You know, when I have X more followers on my social media, then I'll be happy. You know, when I finally find the one, then I'll be happy. This is literally what magic has taught us is the exact way to not get any of that. Magic works on one simple fundamental principle. You don't need a new spell, you don't need a ritual, you don't need some secret grimoire. The principle is very simple. It's the law of entanglement. Whatever you vibrate and whatever's in a match of that vibration will show up in your life because you enter into psychic rapport with it. So if you unlock the ecstasy, the joy, the happiness, the fulfillment, the deliciousness within yourself, what's going to happen? It's going to show up in your life. Now when it shows up, it's not instantly there. Now it maybe brings up other unconscious, hidden, repressed things that you have to deal with and heal with. That's what you then take into your ritual work. That's what you then symbolize through your candles as you represent your active imagination through that, and you internally begin this work and this alchemy and this transformation. That's when you can relook at your grimoires and now understand what these ancient magicians were. You look also not just at those little maps, those little methods and rituals. You look at the technique, the principle behind it, the developmental theories that go into it, and you create your own. It's the same as like a seduction guide, right? Some guy gives you a thing about, always... I love that like stupid thing from the pickup arts community, negging, where you technically insult a woman, but in a nice way. Like you'll say something like, "Oh, you're a model. Wow, man, like a hand model," or "You have a nice hat. It reminds me of my grandmother." It's these insulting things, but then they're said by people that are narcissists, that aren't actually confident, and it just comes through. The actual purpose behind that entire thing was not to telegraph over interest, that you weren't being influenced by the other person. But you know how you really do that without a technique? You figure out your personality might actually need some work as an individual, and you should stop putting, that on a pedestal, the other person on a pedestal, because the reason people fail there is not because of the technique, but because they're putting too much value in another person and not enough value in themselves because they haven't discovered it. And now again, that can also be misinterpreted. It can become this unhealthy ego, or what we call narcissism, where they go like, "I'm great, I'm great, I'm great," but deep down inside they go like, "Oh man, my mother keeps screaming at me, I can't afford my own place." That's an incongruent message. They haven't gone within, they haven't gone into the unconscious, they haven't dealt with this stuff, and they haven't then taken the necessary action in the rational, logical world to bring that about, to really create the transformation. That voice may say, when they go, "And I want my own place, I want my own freedom." You're not going to get that from mom. Get off your butt, get a job, create your own reality, start going there. Now you're going to have self-respect. And the next time somebody tests you, you're going to pass the test. You're not even going to notice it's one, because you're just that radiant person. And that's what that other individual is doing anyway. They're just trying to see, like, is this person for real? The technique doesn't matter. The same as the spell. The spell is irrelevant. You have to write your own spells, your own rituals, your own grimoire. And the only way you're ever going to do that is by establishing a healthy relationship within yourself, and then systemically increasing your deservingness of ecstasy, your deservingness of wealth, your deservingness of pleasure, not because of mind games, but because of actively discovering it within yourself already. Going within and finding the representative of your unconscious of that, finding the memories of where that actually comes from, your fears, your beliefs in poverty and in limited thinking, and then changing and healing at that level. And again, I'm sharing this in the form of an episode, an idea, but trust me, it's real work. This is what we spend so much time in ritual doing, and in meditation and daily disciplines, to change and heal these inner narratives, because the story you tell yourself about why you don't have what you want is the reason you don't have what you want. It's when you go like, people are this, women are that, men are this, companies that, this is my story. You're holding on to that is you holding on to an identity, which is a collective of vibration. Your life, your world, is a reflection of that. If you want more ecstasy, you want more deliciousness, you want more joy, you want more happiness, that is what you need to change. You need to change who you are, because who you are is the vault key on the tree of life, on the collective unconscious, on the actual fundamental quantum field from which all things are born, all reality is created. And when you do that, you can begin to invite ecstasy in, because you can begin to discover the mythology within yourself, your own private hero's journey. And by doing that, the richness and the beauty come in from your emotions. That then floods over into your behavior. That then triggers quantum changes in the world and synchronicities. And then the opportunities show up. If you want your life to change, go within and do the inner work that is necessary. And if you're not sure how to do it, there's plenty of programs out there that teaches you how to work with active imagination, how to start interpreting your dreams. But don't do like so many others do when they go into their ritual chambers and they work with other deities, but they're repressing the archetypes within themselves. They're repressing the inner story. They're numbing the depression. They're numbing the negative feelings instead of going in, representing those negative feelings and beginning a dialogue with them. You're not a singular being. You're a multi-dimensional, multi-plural being. You're a plural entity. You have many beings within your unconscious. And it's time to start becoming a good ruler. It's time to get clear on what your ethics are, what your ethos are, what your vision and mission is for life. And then it's time to go within and sit with the different, archetypes and beings and deities there, and then build that relationship and come all to the same point of agreement. So you're working with the different parts of yourself to your vision. This is crucial, because until you have worked through the ones in your personal unconscious, you stand no chance against the ones in the collective unconscious. And all these spiritual realms that we represent in the Kabbalistic tree and on the other side, those are even further. And if you don't have conscious awareness of these most basic ones within you, you're going to be ridden by the others. You're not going to have control. And you're going to see the madness that we see historically from all these little bastardized systems that don't have the benefit of a healthy, structure. Magic is not in the old world. It's the study of the new. And if you're not integrating the new insights in psychology and personal research and quantum mechanics and new biology and business and behavioral science with your magic, you're honestly just attaching yourself to the magician archetype, which is the air archetype. That means you're only looking at one of your elements and not all four of them. And you're not even ready to look at the planetary dimensions or the ones behind them. Don't let these little systems and books trick you to what this process is about. This is a process of inner alchemical transformation. And I know this hasn't been the most delicious thing. It's not been in the sense where I'm like, oh, you deserve all the joy in the world. Because I shouldn't have to tell you that. You should feel that you deserve the joy of the world, and that you should have it first class and the best quality relationships, and that you can have a beautifully rich magical life and a successful business life and successful relationships and great health and all of these things. And if you're not getting that, if you're a serious magical practitioner and you're putting your time into ritual and you're doing all of these things but you're not getting that, it's because you're not doing this. It's because you're out there chasing, the candle, and you're not actually seeing Mother Nature right next to you, saying like, hey, here I am. I'm here through your feelings. I'm here in your dreams. I'm here in your unconscious. The higher self, the demonic self, the sacred self is always talking to you. You don't need a ritual, a private dance, or a strange scent of incantations and evocations to get in touch with it. I was raised as a spiritualist, and I learned very quickly that I don't need a grimoire to get in touch with any entities. I can get in touch with the entities through my spirit guide, because they got contact to every other spirit guide. So I could just learn to talk to them and I didn't need any of those things. What I needed, though, is I needed to start off with active imagination, to get myself in touch with that deeper part, and then work with the symbolisms. Not to take these things literally, but to look at them symbolically and then interpretate the meaning, and then relate that meaning to what's actively going on in my life right now and what I'm actively working on, and then to do the work. But also at the same time to stand as the ethical king between the forces of the infinite. And as you do that, and you build a trust of the various portions of yourself, your ecstasy will begin to flow. Your joy and your happiness will begin to flow. It won't be externally dependent anymore, because you've gotten in touch with the fundamental sources within yourself of that. You'll be self-validated. And by being self-validated, your emotional states will change. As such, your behavioral states will change. From these behaviors, you'll get new results, new outcomes, and that will build on top of each other, and that'll create a new destiny, a new life for yourself. That's at the psychological level. At the quantum mechanical, your identity is changing as a result of this connecting with these other experiences. Your sense of yourself, your sphere of sensation, or what's called the aura, will change, which means your energetic body will change, which means it'll change what it attracts and what it brings in your life. From a quantum mechanical point of view, your vibration shifts because your entanglement shifts. When your entanglement shifts, that means what you gain access to in the collective field also shifts. And now suddenly those new experiences come out. But if those experiences come out and you're not taking action on them, you're not following through on them, it's because there's something still repressed in the psyche, in the shadow, in the unconscious, preventing you from walking into your destiny. That means casting another spell is not going to work it. It means go into the dreams, go into the sadness, represent it, dialogue with it, engage with it, come to common terms, come to a shared purpose, and then find the maturest expression of that is relevant in this world, because your archetypes don't actually have a relationship with this world. They live in the mythical world of the infinite. They live in other dimensions and other realities. And you are the representative of this world. And if you can't create harmony between the entities within you, how are you going to create it with other people in this world? And that's necessary to build families, to build business, to build joy. And that's what you deserve. You deserve your successful brand. You deserve your happy, polyamorous or monogamous relationship. You deserve your tribe, and you get to see people for their beauty, not just for their positions. We get caught on these positions. We get caught having stupid fights when we have lost sight of the true vision within ourselves and our experience. Now, when you do that, I want to leave you with one more thought. You've been programmed that there is limitations and there's lacks. And that's because you've been referencing these things externally. When you start referring them internally, suddenly new opportunities and new possibilities come out. Then you need to begin shifting your beliefs and your positions to recognize that what you want and who you are, what your fundamental being is not rare and unique. That just serves your need for significance. It's abundant. This weird, creepy things or strange kinks that you have that's so uniquely you, they are rich, they're abundant. There are thousands and thousands of people that have the same, that want what you want, that have the same kinks, the same interests, the same pleasures, that have the same dreams for companies and for visions and for relationship dynamics. They're in abundance. The only reason you're not getting it is because you're perceiving yourself as lacked. You're perceiving yourself as limited. You're perceiving this as weird. You're still attaching shame to it. Instead of loving and embracing and opening up to these things as that they are abundant, that they are rich, that nature is filled with this. That you're getting messages from the divine of possibilities. All you have to do then is just find the healthiest way to express it. The most beautiful and exciting way that you can feel proud of and inspired by, because if you're doing that, you're going in 100%, you're fully present, and that's the energy of ecstasy that will attract everybody, because everyone will go like, that seems amazing, I want to be part of that, and you're going to get more people to be part of that. All right, I hope this has been helpful. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode, and I want to just say thank you again for everybody that has been a loyal subscriber to the show, that's been leaving their comments and everything. No Captain Diabetes, I am not changing the length of my intro. I don't care what YouTube's algorithm says. I like it, and it's going to stay. But thanks for the comment, and thanks for the feedback, not from yourself, but from everybody else that's been giving me kind of ideas and concepts. As the show grows, please keep giving me comments, keep giving me feedback, help me create something that we can all find absolutely delicious. And if I've said something that sparked an idea and interest within you, that's maybe changed something, also please let me know. I'd love to hear your stories. I am genuinely interested and curious about others, because until we are all free, not one of us is truly free. Anyway, I'm Adam Knox, and remember to live deliciously.